Left East to West with me, Nikki Hill.
And me, Tom Mulcair. We're recording in Winnipeg on Sunday afternoon, just after the adjournment of the Federal NDP convention, where Avi Lewis has been announced as the party's leader in a first ballot win.
We're actually still in the convention hall. You can probably see behind us. There's maybe a dozen people in here.
You can hear the banging.
You can hear a lot in the background, so sorry for that. We're also really grateful for our panel joining us after this lively weekend. So we had Leah Ward here with Tom and I. Melanie RIcher was here all weekend but had to head back to Ottawa, so she's joining us online, as is Farouk Karim. We're going to give you details about convention that you're not going to get anywhere else and some insight and analysis from our convention panel.
Okay, let's introduce, before we get to our details, let's introduce our panelists a little bit more. Leah Ward is a VP at Wellington Advocacy, and they are a former Director of Communications for Rachel Notley in the Alberta NDP caucus. Melanie RIcher is a principal at Burns of Strategies and the Director of Communications and Media for former NDP leader Jagmeet Singh. She's a frequent commentator. You've probably seen her working hard covering convention. She was with CPAC from last weekend. And Farouk Karim is a former NDP staffer who worked in Parliament Hill, including serving as communications director for Guy Caron during his leadership race. And he's now hosts a podcast called Distinct, a weekly podcast that explains Quebec politics for the wider Canadian audience. And he's a staffer at Canadian Union of Postal Workers and Labor Movement. So these are the guys, we're going to hear from them.
Yeah.
After we
break it down.
A couple of key points, I guess, that we need to get out there.
Yeah. So, as you can see, it's empty hall. Convention's done. Leaders elected. Congratulations to Avi Lewis. We understand we're going to hear more from him. It looks like he's hitting the ground running already. Pretty big calendar full of events and plans in the next few days, including a press conference tomorrow with Don Davies, who's been the interim leader of the Federal NDP, delivered his last speech today in that capacity. And it's been a really busy day already in this post-leadership election period. So let's get into it. First of all, some major points about what happened here just this morning when we got our leadership vote. So there were about 100,000 members who signed up to the NDP over the election period. This morning, we're going to use some numbers. So there were 70,930 votes that were eligible. We won't get you into the detail of spoiled ballots and how many folks actually did vote. Avi Lewis had enough votes to win on the first ballot at 56%. So again, big congratulations. That gave Avi Lewis 39,734 votes. Heather McPherson, 20,899. Tennille Johnson, 5,159. Rob Ashton, 4,193. And then Tony McLeod at 945 votes.
Yeah. So a pretty clear win.
Pretty clear win.
No doubt about that.
I think we can say decisive.
Yeah, I can say decisive, and I'm sure that he is very happy about that, to get that kind of endorsement from the membership. A couple of things I think interesting here, Nikki, and we'll go into this a lot more later. I don't think we're going to touch on the issue of participation very much, but then with 100,000 members and 71% of them turning out to vote, that's actually very high.
It is,
for these kind of races, where often the results, regardless of party, can be about 50%. I mean, that's, so the campaigns, the folks came out and voted mostly.
Yeah. Well, and I was looking at the numbers too of the ballot breakdown, and they mostly were online votes. So we have a one member, one vote system in the NDP now. And so that means that people found it easy to get online and cast those ballots because there was quite a high number of that online balloting. So pretty good. Yeah. So, and I think the other thing too is because I don't think we're going to get into this later with our panel, but I think, there's been a lot of narrative and lead up to this convention about the relevance of the NDP, momentum around it. I would argue, having such a high turnout, we had over, I think, almost pushing into 2,000 delegates here. Huge turnout for the election race. People obviously caring. So no matter who was winning here, I think we had a fair bit of interest in this leadership race, which makes she wasn't as observed by the mainstream media.
Yeah, and I would say, just in terms of mood, Avi Lewis won, but people voted for other candidates too. Yeah. I found the mood was pretty positive, even though, a lot of people, that wasn't the candidate that they voted for, but the mood was positive. One thing I would touch on and, notice here is something we're going to get into a little bit with our panelists, I think. Rob Ashton was perceived as being the third, but he ended up being the fourth,
Fourth,
which
yeah.
is kind of puzzling. Tennille quite strong.
Yeah.
But what do you make of that?
I am a
Not,
huge Tennille Johnson fan,
yeah,
and I want
a
to
lot of
see
energy.
her take that Pearl River, I think it's Pearl River North Island riding. I
Yeah.
might be mixing up the names
No,
here that she ran in the federal last time. I especially love to see her take it from Aaron Gunn.
yes.
And I think they did a great job. I think there was a really cool thing we actually talked about on the show before, which was this partnership between Tennille and Tony McQuail getting each other over the line, but also the other campaigns and supporting them. But I think Tennille was also, I believe it's the first Indigenous woman on an NDP ballot and the first Indigenous person. I want to get this right because we had some questions about this. The first Indigenous person on a federal ballot. I think it's to the end
Uh-huh.
of the process. So I think there was a great campaign about bringing her voices. She's a social worker, but she's also really cool,
Yeah.
great energy. Someone we want to see, I think, continue in
Yeah.
politics. And people really loved that about her.
Well,
And they ran a great campaign, like credit
yeah.
to them.
Yeah. Now, apparently something like 15, I can't remember the number, but I think I was told 15,000 people voted in the last 48 hours.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And if you were watching on CPAC or on the news, you saw her performance.
Yeah.
She's a very compelling person,
It was. Yeah.
and there's something infectious about her.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether she maybe got a last minute burst
Yeah,
of,
maybe.
hey, I'm going to
Yeah.
vote for her.
Yeah, it was a pretty impressive
yeah.
turnout. So
Now Rob is, he's got to be disappointed with that, but he centered his campaign about the labor movement. Again, we'll talk about this more, but he really, I don't know whether he struggled because there was a polarization between him, between Heather and Abby, which didn't leave him much space. I think he maybe his campaign wobbled a couple times in terms of communication. What exactly were they saying? I think,
yeah.
where do we?
This is Rob Ashton, and again, big fan. He's actually practically a neighbor. We say we're in the same riding. I've known him for years. We've worked on different advocacy issues together. And he is one of those people that when you talk to him, and I think as we think about how we talk to workers, he is someone who can go and have a conversation with a regular person about politics. Now, I also think, the NDP being founded with the labor movement. We are a party that is founded with the labor movement. Maybe as well, we didn't see that translate into all our labor delegates this weekend, though. And I was talking to a number of union leaders who had, a high number of credentials available, but a lower number of delegates here. So maybe there might be a bit of that as well, where people just didn't make it to Winnipeg or they didn't get those credentials underway and vote, even though, again, we have one member, one vote, but maybe not present in the room as well.
Abby gave his acceptance speech this morning after a very good speech by Don Davies. Abby gave a very good speech himself. And
another funny Don Davies speech.
Very
so
funny.
We all get to meet the funny Don Davies.
Couple of I think we got three quotes here that are kind of interesting that maybe we'll just explore for a minute. He said that everywhere in Canada, this party is united in our commitment to work with people, and no, we will not always agree on every single issue. That, in a way, sums up where we are at.
Yeah,
I think fairly.
Yeah.
Yep. That underlying belief, whether it's Premier Eby or Marge Stiles or Need Nenshi or Carla Beck, is respect for working people. That's a basis. And then there seems to be some, fluidity from there, shall we say. He's also put out the idea of, this is more challenging maybe. He wants to Trump-proof the economy by investing massively in Canadian economic independence, using the unmatched power of public ownership to ensure the fundamentals of a good life. That was part of his acceptance speech, and sort of offer. And then finally, his closing line, and I'm not sure whether he used this one before, but I liked it, and I think it could be very effective for him. He says, "I am promising that we will work towards a government that works for the many, not for the money."
Yeah.
What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, I think, a speech that had been definitely, I think, tested throughout the campaign so that, many, not the money, was getting some good nod support. I also think, we're at this time where, and we'll talk later with our panel about some of the provincial sections and, especially where the NDP is in government provincially. We saw some additional moves today from where we're in opposition in response to the leadership. But I think when we go back into that investing massively in the Canadian economic dependence, we've actually seen what I would say that whether it's Carney or some of the provincial premiers, that when we're looking at how to respond to the Trump threat and building the Canadian economy, we have really been drawing back into some of the old ideas and starting with them on where we could build an economy. Like maybe what we see and Avi Lewis bring in here and what he's indicating is where we need to be going when we're talking about things like a just transition or a green economy. So I think that's probably layering in here where, there is potential for
there's a bit of a jobs and economic agenda. He actually went into more detail in the speech, and I'm sure
we're not going to cover the whole speech yet.
But he does go into a little bit more detail in the speech about how he sees this economic agenda, jobs agenda coming out. And I say for myself, I think that this is obviously when we can talk about redistribution, we can talk about healthcare, we can talk about all kinds of important things. But if we're not talking about jobs, and people aren't feeling like we're a party that can make sure they have a paycheck every Thursday, then we're not really
not really a party for the working people.
That's kind of the problem. So anyway, I like seeing that there. Do we want to talk about the slate issue?
Yeah, the slate. So we did, coming out of convention, we wanted to do a little bit of analysis about what actually happened here, what maybe you didn't see on CPAC. So Avi Lewis, of course, we had the leadership campaigns. Those were all underway. We also, I think, traditionally at every convention, there are going to be slates. Often those are really informed by our labor partnerships as well, and who turns out who's being put forward. I think they're thoughtfully put forward into ensuring the diversity of our party as in every section that we do this. So we did have internal elections, table officers for the party, which is actually relatively small, party executive, and then our federal council, which is our governing body between these conventions, because we can only bring us all together so often. So the most important bodies of our party. So 3 of the 4 table officers elected from the full convention's floor. So we all got to ballot. Others elected by caucuses, which were, some were hours of balloting on Friday night, as only New Democrats like to do. There was a lot of there was a lot of calls for helping people out with food and hours.
Yeah. Nikki said she got hangry.
I did get hangry,
but she wants me to say she stuck it in to the very end. But I'm not sure that's 100% true, Nikki.
I'm sorry, BC caucus. I got hangry. I stayed for a few votes. Just put that into the public record now. So I think we do have our labor caucuses, women's caucus, and so on, and then regional representation. So what we also saw, which is relatively unusual, I would say, if I think back to other leadership conventions, is that we did see a slate from the Avi Lewis campaign. They did take the 3 convention elected spots. So our president, treasurer, vice president here, and then we'll see, I believe today that some of those folks were going into other meetings as we wrap the day, and we've been sitting here. And so I'll probably see a pretty big mix here from across the country, but we do have the leader having brought in the 3 top spots from his team and folk that he wanted there. So, it does, I think, change some of the dynamic here. So you're both leader, you're starting out on your path, and then you've got a new executive who's also setting out a new path and learning the role. So we'll, see where this all goes, and and wish everybody luck in these new roles.
And we only touch on it. We're only going to touch on it with the panel, but there's been some criticism here. I think we have to be honest to say that maybe it wasn't necessary to run run a slate that associated with a candidate. There was another slate, but it wasn't associated with a candidate per se. Whether that was maybe a little bit of overreach, whether that was really maybe creates a problem in terms of, now Avi has to go, nurture some relationships back again. So,
so that's, I think, what we have to see. And as I think Avi Lewis is indicating he's going to hit that ground running. There's also some work to do to, repair some of these relationships. I think, an observation that's been made is and I think we will probably talk about this a little, is decrease in representation and making sure that we're a party that reflects the diversity of the country. A lot of work that's been done to build in. And I do think it's a natural instinct, I think, for a leader to want their own people around them. And of course, we have staff roles at the federal level as well. There's going to be that, I think, lean into wanting your people. And that's, great. And we've certainly seen that in BC elections over elections. But you also want to make sure that you're not only bringing in your people, because our party is huge. We're only at 6 MPs right now. There's a lot of rebuilding to do. And so you're going to have to bring in that bigger tent, including people who were on that other slate. And actually, we should just be clear, there were not only 2 slates. I think we had 3 or 4 different slates here, but there were 2, I think, that had the majority of the votes going on.
Yeah. Typically in the NDP, there's assembly of somewhat of a slate, and usually it's done in a way to try and incorporate various tendencies and regions and make sure there's enough women and enough people from different.
And it takes a while to put that slate together.
It takes a while. And I would say, I don't think, from what I understand, talking to folks, that the Lewis campaign really turned their mind to this one until the very end.
Late.
So maybe a little scrambly to try and pull it together, and therefore didn't quite make the mark of the usual balances between in representation. So maybe they know it, right? Maybe they know it. They go, well, you know what?
Well, and this is the things on the list of things to look at now as you're coming out of the convention, where you got to as a new leader, and who you need around the table with you. So I think, once you become leader, you tend to realize you need a lot of a bigger table. We've done a bigger table, bigger tent, especially if you're going to pull off some of the commitments that you've made in terms of that local strength. But you need every person who ran here at this convention probably has a role that they need to be taking, whether it's locally or provincially or at that federal, and doing some of those relationship building and using a big step.
You might even say every person at this convention altogether. They all need some sort of assignment to go home with. Yeah. Well, should we
get into our guests?
And let's get over to our panel and dive into these issues a little more.
Sounds great. Let's get into some questions.
Okay. Avi Lewis won on the first ballot, and his slate won the top table officer positions. He now firmly leads the Federal NDP. But it's been a long race, and there has been some damage done in getting there. So that needs to be addressed in this new role. We've got lots of details to dig into, but just top line. Avi's speech talked about unity. How much of a challenge does he have ahead of him to start as he takes his next step? Now Leah, let's start with you, since you're right here with us.
I think there was something quite telling about the speech that Avi delivered around unity and how he spoke about it, almost declaratively, and less an invitation. And I think he's really going to need to lean into the idea that he needs to do the outreach, that the conversation about unity needs to be an invitation to reunite, and not so much a statement that we are now united. We saw within minutes of his election that there were statements coming out of Alberta and Saskatchewan, recently again in BC. And yes, I'll leave it for now, but I think that's a good indicator that we are not yet united, and that work needs to be taken on seriously.
Farouk or Mel, you want to jump in on?
Vas-y, Farouk.
Okay, no, I thought unity was the main message he wanted to convey today. Now, as in love life and in politics, actions speak louder than words. So we'll see if that's followed up with action. Now, the first reactions from the Western provinces are pretty clear. Mr. Lewis will need to do more if he wants that unity. But there's two forces that are colliding. Mr. Lewis has a clear mandate, 56%, 70% participation rate, 1.4 million raised. So he has that mandate. It's not like it's a clear mandate. So does the government in provinces and the official opposition in provinces. So that's going to be the clash. But he's going to have to settle that, because before talking to Canadians, you need to put your house in order.
Yeah, the interesting thing that Leah pointed out too of, declaring versus invitation is the same thing that I had picked up on. I don't think it's enough to, say the ball is in their court. You're the federal leader. You have to be the bigger person. And you're also, to be frank, the one with less to lose, because obviously those who are in official opposition or in government, it is more of a not more important, but the results are there. So you need to consider those carefully. And again, as federal leader, you're going to have to manage a lot of those relationships. So my advice to the campaign as they're mending those relationships or building those relationships is to, let the past be the past and stop, trying to bring that up and be the bigger person.
Yeah.
Be the one that's doing the outreach, be the one that's saying, I want to collaborate, and be the one that's saying, particularly to our friends out west, that I want to be a partner to help you deliver for people in Alberta and Saskatchewan, in Manitoba and British Columbia, wherever it be, instead of, the door's open. If they want to talk to me, they can talk to me. I don't think that's going to work.
That didn't catch my eye well. And just for listeners, we're in the Winnipeg convention space, and the convention's over, it's wrapped, and so we're hearing some of the noise from the people who are taking the staging down and whatnot. Don't, we're not on fire. Not yet.
Not yet.
We cannot see if we're on fire.
Nikki.
Okay, so let's talk more about leadership. So obviously sometimes in winning you also lose something, and in losing you're still winning something here. So for Avi, coming into his first day,
I think we should take a break for this. Okay, it was a fire alarm.
It was a fire alarm.
We're just sitting here.
It was a little.
One of the things that I really want to pick up on is what Leah said about, declaring that we're united versus the invitation of where we're united. And one of the words, or one of the things that I kind of picked up on, is the approach of the ball is in your court as it relates to the provinces. I don't think that that's enough. You're the federal leader now, so it's the onus is on you to be the bigger person and to do the work needed to mend those relationships, and that will require putting feelings aside and doing a lot of the outreach, doing a lot of the proposals for collaboration, and not getting in the way of the folks who are currently governing or who are about to potentially govern. Because the truth of the matter is the stakes are bigger for them than they are for us right now, because they have either government or potentially being next in line for government on the line. So the advice that I would give to Avi and his team is to be the bigger person, to do the outreach, and to show those folks in those provinces in a real way how he can collaborate to make people's lives better in those provinces.
If I can add one thing to what Mel's saying here, is that I think it certainly wasn't said out loud, but there's a little bit of a tone between the lines that that there was some sort of a hierarchy between the federal government and the provinces, and he needs to remember that does not exist.
Yeah, a little more peer-to-peer, maybe.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
We're partners.
You're not prime minister.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk leadership campaigns. So we just had great team here of candidates, but they're looking to win. Some won, obviously. Sometimes in winning, you also lose something, and in losing, you could win something. So for Avi, is there a loss that needs to be addressed? And for our other candidates, did their campaigns manage to make a point that will endure, even if they didn't actually win?
Yeah, who do you want? Let's go with reverse. We'll start with you, Melanie, and we'll work backwards.
Yeah, I guess one of the big things that I would say maybe is not something that we heard a lot in Avi's speeches, and maybe we heard in Heather's speeches, is this idea of the big table or the big tent. The idea of, today he's no longer the leader for the people who voted for him. He's a leader for all New Democrats. And day one, really, of his campaign to go talk to Canadians. And we do this thing in our party where, you've got to be the most progressive and you've got to agree with 100 different things. And if you don't, sometimes it feels like we're telling people need not apply. And one of the things that we heard from Premier Canoe, we heard from Rachel Notley, and we've heard from others is, if we want to actually deliver the things that we know are important to people to make their lives better, we got to win. And the way that we win is we got to go talk to people and talk to people in a way that they understand. So I think that's maybe if we really want to find a loss, and there's some good numbers coming out from the Avi team today, so I don't think there's many. But that's the one thing, the one message that we didn't hear from Avi, and we perhaps heard from other teams that I thought, at least for this New Democrat resonated, because I may not necessarily agree, with everything that Avi put forward, but I definitely agree with a lot of it. But the most important thing, I guess, is the idea that the NDP makes people's lives better, and we really need to double down on that, and to show folks, or continue to show folks that we're the ones that have their back. So I guess that's if you were to find one loss or one improvement from the other campaigns, that's the one that I paid attention to.
Yeah, Farouk.
Yeah, the fact that how the numbers came out for the 4 other candidates was kind of surprising for me, especially for Mr. Ashton, and so maybe that will have some repercussion in the party. But what I would suggest for Mr. Lewis is not to be too drunk with the numbers he had, not to, because there's a tendency with the overwhelming win like this on the first ballot to come in and to clean slate and to start with new. Right. And I would suggest, highly recommend not to do that for many reasons. One is experience. There's a lot of experience in the party that needs to be tapped into. I know there was a lot of adversarial for Mr. Lewis in the last years. Right. I was a staffer during the Mulcair era, so I saw that from the inside. Right. I would say bravo to Mr. Lewis, because usually critics of the party don't become leaders. So he did organize and he did become a leader. And he put his the action followed the word. So that's a good thing. But don't use that to bring all those candidates in the fold. Give them special roles, important roles, especially that some of them, I'm thinking of Ashton, Tennille, or even McPherson, they're in places that you will need them there. And you would need those people to speak to the provincial counterparts too. So you need to bring all these people together to make sure that, because the unity part in the next weeks, next month is the most crucial part, because otherwise Canadians won't listen. So he needs to put that in order first.
Yeah, I think that's such an excellent point. And especially when you mentioned Heather McPherson is the only sitting MLA or MP. Sorry, I get steeped in provincial politics too. But, that's an important thing that she represents, and an asset that he can use, not to mention she was the closest runner-up. So I do hope that he takes seriously the experience that she brings and honors that. If I think about sort of one of the trade-offs, I don't know that it was necessarily deliberate or maybe even an obvious trade-off at this point, more of a red flag. But we're seeing, with the energy that Jagmeet was able to bring to the party in terms of young people and people of color was really important for our movement. It enriched us. It gave us credibility as a national party. And it's really important to represent the diversity of this country in our party. It's on its face right now. We're seeing an executive that's mostly white. We're seeing some of that diversity is not immediately reflected. So I won't call it a loss yet. I'm going to say, watch that. Let's not let that go. Let's work double time, overtime, to make sure that we preserve diversity in this party and a welcoming place for people of color.
Yeah, we can't not talk about these 2 letters that came out, and there's been as well some comment from Mr. Eby, and we saw a tweet from Mark Stiles as well, and we saw a comment from Wab. But the ones I think the most concerning and we need to address it are the ones from Carla and from Nikki. Immediately after the announcement of Avi's win, the NDP leader in Alberta put out a press release saying the direction of the federal party under this leader is not in the interest of Alberta. And then we had Carla Beck say she won't meet with him. This was in response to a request that she said she received yesterday for a meeting. She says she will not meet with him until he reverses his position on opposing any fossil fuel development, including LNG. Okay, but if managed correctly, can a distinction, or creating a distinction between the federal and provincial parties, actually be a positive for both, or for all? But maybe in that, are there guardrails? Are there certain lanes that people have to stay in to keep this to be a safe relationship where things don't turn negative, and stay in the idea that Naheed's going to do his thing, Carl's going to do his thing, Abby's going to do their thing. And as Abby likes to say, we're going to disagree sometimes. Or as Heather would say, we like to find the points of agreement, which are kind of 2 ways of saying, 2 different ways of saying the same thing. But maybe is the distinction, could it be played as a helpful thing if managed correctly, Leah? What do you think?
Oof.
You solved it. Yeah.
Lee solved all the problems.
Right here, right now. Look, I mean, I think Mel and I especially probably did commentary on, you know, I don't want to say opposing sides, but on different sides of this debate for years now, right? Like, I can't think of a single show that I did during when Rachel Notley was the leader in Alberta and Jagmeet Singh was the leader in federally, where I didn't have to address those disagreements, right? It does not go away. And there is never not an appetite for those questions from the media. They're always looking for those angles because any kind of any new sign of tension or conflict is of interest and it blows the whole thing up and it puts pressure on both parties. I don't know that I yet feel optimistic that this could be a productive tension. And I think where I worry now is the more polarized nature of it. So I think when we and Mel were doing this dance on behalf of our respective leaders, there was at least there was often a conversation. There was an agreement around the workers and sort of a respectful, I want to say, sacred cow around the industry itself. In this case, we're talking about a very direct and very explicit opposition to the fossil fuel industry. That's tougher. That's a tougher one to walk around. It's a tougher one to do the thing that Mel and I did often. And many people, obviously, the rest of you did as well, where you sort of focus on the agreements, where you stake out your ground relative to your constituencies and the people that you represent. Those were all actually very useful ways of holding that tension. This one's a bit tougher.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure how they navigate it.
Let's take it to Mel. You since you've debated this one with Leah before, can it be a productive tension? Does it? Is there a distinction that has a difference, but it's also okay?
Right. I do. I agree with Leah. I find it challenging to figure out just because of the very nature of the constitution of the party, but also the different factions that we're representing. But I think at the core of this one, to Leah's point, I think there was a relationship that existed before it turned sour. And then when it did turn sour, an acknowledgement, at least privately, that, the federal party was at fault for that and for not doing it properly and an onus of wanting to fix that. Now, was it always easy? No, but the understanding that it was it was Jagmeet's team's onus to continue to reach out to Alberta, to continue to make sure that we were trying to mend what we had broken. And again, an acknowledgement that no matter what, Jagmeet was not going to make things worse. He was not going to, throw punches unnecessarily. And I think this time, as it relates to Avi, there's a bit of I'm proud that I made this difficult for people. I'm proud that this became difficult for folks in Alberta. And I think what you're seeing now with Nenshi is I'm now going to have to continue that battle that you kind of started. And if I'm Carla Beck, I'm thinking the same thing. And of course, with David Eby, with some of the comments that were made in British Columbia in the leadership race, when I'm governing and I'm looking to a provincial election that I may lose, and there's these projects that are on the line that there's a very sensitive ecosystem with industry and First Nations at play. That's way harder. And the plus side of even that is Jagmeet still had 40 some MPs, right? When he did this, and most of those MPs were in British Columbia. We're down to 6 MPs. That's a way different conversation. You're less, again, I hate saying this, it breaks my heart saying this, the last election broke my heart, but we're less important, right? So we can't assume the same space and expect the same respect. So I think a lot of those relationships will need mending. And again, it'll be the onus on Avi for what happened previously, but also the onus on Avi as federal leader that he's going to have to do the work and his team will have to do the work from a team to team perspective to show the others that there's an opportunity for them to come to the table instead of it just being a challenge. And if you're able to show the opportunity to collaborate, show the opportunity for benefit, then I think that it'll be okay that there's a few things that we disagree on, but there's got to, at the very base of it, have to have a bit of a respect there. And I think that's what's lacking, is people don't believe that there is a respect. So until that's shown, I think that's going to be a difficult thing to navigate.
For just to fine tune this for you, just with Jagmeet or with Tom Mulcair before, the expectations were different. In a way, we come into this with different expectations because we know the positions. Do you think that matters in this issue with Carla and Nenshi?
Yeah, I think what Melanie just said about where we are as a party, at 6 MPs and the level of support we have among Canadians, it's an incentive to have bold ideas and not to listen and to be bolder and to be defiant, right? Because, I mean, if you think about electoral math, we're at like 6, 7, 8, 9%, right? 10%, 12. I saw 12 in a poll, but let's say we're at 10%. To get to 20, to get to 10 to 20, which get us mostly to official status, it's hard, but it's not as hard than to get from 20 to 40 to form power. So so that's the conundrum of the NDP always. To get to 20, we can get there to 20. I think there's 20% of Canadians that are open to bold ideas and to public grocery and to break the telecoms and all that. I think there is, if well messaged, I think there is a 20% available there. The problem then becomes, how do we get from that 20 to that 40 to form power? And that's what the conundrum comes. Right now, Mr. Lewis is at the level where he can, and plus with the numbers he have from the leadership race, he has a clear mandate to do what he wants to do. And I'm guessing that he's going to do that. He painted himself in a corner during the campaign. There's no nuance. Now, I always want to see a great opportunity in crisis. And the way I see it, there's a one of the strongest trope in politics is Nixon goes to China, meaning somebody who is associated with one part of one ideology, not suddenly, but moves from that ideology and brings with them the people that supports him. So to be clear of what I'm saying, I think resource extraction is something. It's a zero sum. It's either you're for it or you're not. Like, there's no in between, right? And I think in the short, middle, and long-term interest, national interest of the country, we're gonna have to extract resources. Now, the question is how, right? And where I see Mr. Lewis in his political proposition, where there could be some bridging, is on the public participation. I think that if we can do a grand bargain, resource extraction with public participation that goes to social programs or to affordability or something like that, and you can create that sort of program, you can bring in the provinces and the federal, but Mr. Lewis will have to put some water in his wine, as we say. And so he's going to have to do that because he's really, really identified with the environmental wing of the party. But if he successfully moves a little bit and they move a little bit, then we can have something really, really, really strong, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's interesting at the opportunity part and looking at the EV statement, just being from BC in the last year since we've had the Trump administration, it is a pretty big pivot into the LNG, the major projects, maybe some of where it was different conversation when we were elected or even in 2017 we came into power. So I do think we saw there in that EV statement, like, these are the priorities we have as British Columbia government. But I sort of do think another opportunity here is on the movement building side, because there is a challenge in BC now for the EV government in that environmental base, in some of the climate work that needs to happen. So there could be opportunities to integrate a bit here, but also, in a third term government, having some movement building going on can be a big asset when there is going to be a campaign in the next couple of years minimum. So, there's some threads here for everybody. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the other results. So huge support we saw for Rob Ashton from the Labour movement. Great. We saw his showcase yesterday. Lots of union members, the Steelworkers National Union, UFCW. We had the CLC president, lots of union locals and leaders. Well, and we just saw this morning, it didn't actually translate to the ballot box. So what do we think happened here? I also just want to give a shout out to the fact that Rob is in my home riding, and I've already talked to him today and said, hey, next step is getting you to run in the federal and get rid of our conservative MP. But in today's vote, what do we actually think happened? Leah, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I also talked to Rob and was happy to hear that he's not planning to go anywhere, and hopefully we'll see more.
Yes.
I think that's good for the party and healthy for all of us. So,
Absolutely.
you know, it may have been a little bit of assumption making that folks assumed that more support existed, and that kind of dimmed a bit of the urgency around getting the vote out. It's hard to say on day one exactly what might have happened, but that's probably one of my suspicions. I think there might have also been some confusion among voters of members who were voting, if they were showing up with a demand for change, that was mostly that demand for change sat with the Avi Lewis camp. If they were there for some stability and kind of like a
Continuity.
then it was kind of the obvious choice. Rob represented a little bit of both. His message around the future of the party is to return to our roots. Probably attracted people who wanted a little bit of both. Maybe weren't quite interested in seeing, the status quo continue, but weren't ready for as dramatic a change as Avi. And I think that just might have been a smaller pool of people, given that was probably his strongest pitch.
So a bit wedged, probably.
Yeah. Or diluted.
Yeah.
I think too, it shows I so think Rob properly embodies what it means to be, an ally to labor, right? I think he means what he says. He walks the walk. He's not cosplay in any way, shape, or form. But there is still a disconnect between our party and that, right? I think that we've seen that over the last few years of the disconnect between the NDP and our ties to labor. But I also think that there's a disconnect a little bit between labor leadership and their membership also, of like, how do we make sure that we're all on the same line when we're fighting for the same things? And I think it goes back to, I don't want to say everything's a communications problem, because I'm obviously a communicator, and I don't want to, say that the problem is because of me. But I do think that one of the biggest problems, particularly,
it's the research.
Here we are.
It's the research.
The research department. There we go. But one of the biggest problems, and this is not unique to the NDP. We're seeing this, for labor. We saw with the Democrats coming out of the U.S. election, our inability to talk simply with simple solutions, and it's because the problems we're faced aren't simple. But I was having a conversation. I'm not going to say an argument. It was maybe a disagreement with someone, in our universe, about how when Pierre Poilievre came out against temporary foreign workers, that we needed to stand up and say, no, immigration is good. And I was like, whoa. The problem here isn't an immigration problem. The problem here is people feel like their jobs aren't secure. People are worried about temporary foreign workers because they feel precarious in their job. They feel like their job's not secure and they don't have enough money to put food on the table. So if you're responding to that with immigration's good, you're racist if you don't think that immigration's good, you've totally missed the problem, and you've further pushed all those people away, instead of saying, let's talk about what you're actually worried about, and let's make sure, make sure that we are making your jobs more secure. We're making sure that you've got better wages, we've got better protections on the job. And hey, by the way, you need help to do that. So we're going to need immigration to come in and to back you up on the job site. But we're going to make sure that when they are on the job site, they have the same safety training that you do. They have the same wages that you do, and that you're able to work together to, build the project. And that's not what we're doing. And I think the potential of Rob was really good, but it highlights with the result a little bit still our inability to do both things. And I think the work ahead that we need to do to kind of reconcile both those things.
I think Mel hits it on the nail. I'm going to go even further. I think it's another indicator that we might not be the party of workers, and that we need to wrestle with that and to face it, because it's every convention, every meeting, every time, I mean, with NDPers, with the Party of Workers, with the Party of Workers, really, it has been a trend for the last, I would say, mid-90s, that workers are getting away from left-wing parties. This is all over Western democracies. This is not only Canada. In Quebec, post-referendum 95, where the Parti Québécois has been always close to Labour, it's starting to diminish. And today, if you go see private sector union workers, there's a problem there too, because as Melanie says, it's not only the relationship with the NDP and organized labor, it's the relationship with the union representatives and their workers. Mm-hmm. I've worked in unions for 20 years, private sector, public sector, and I've seen how there's no more of that deep education, deep training, political training, things like that have been gone. And it's not only the fault of the unions, yes, because they're doing the job, but it's also culturally, people are more individual. They're in their silos. There's no getting together and doing things collectively, and that's society that has felt like this. And so we have to be cognizant of that and not lie to ourselves and drapes ourselves in the feel-good story that we are the party workers. Rob Ashton embodies 100% the blue-collar, lunch pail, going, hardworking, just stay out of my way. Let me do the work. Just give me good healthcare, good education, good retirement. I'm happy. Okay. That's the guy we should be. That's the person we should be representing. But how come he gets only 5-6%? And it doesn't match. So need to address that too. We need to address union representatives too and talk to them and go see, what are you doing? Are you doing training? What kind of training are you doing with your workers? And so if we want to really do that and counter what Poilievre is doing and the Conservative are doing, and it's not only the Conservative, as Melanie said, the Republicans, Trump with the blue-collar workers, same thing, right? All the right-wing parties in Europe right now that are popular, same thing. So we need to address that, and it can't be sufficient that we are the party of workers. Okay, show me. What do you mean? Mm-hmm. Can you increase my salary? Can you help with healthcare? Can you help with my kids? Can you help with my retirement? Can you help with my job? Can we create new jobs? And if we manage to be that, because we're in a context right now where we're rebuilding Canada, right? Sovereignty is back in, not only in Quebec, not only in Alberta, but Canadian sovereignty, country sovereignty are back in. So what do you need to be sovereign as a country? It's not rocket science. You need to be sufficient, self-sufficient. We are blessed to have all these resources in Canada and all these people with high knowledge and the workforce. So we can be sufficient on that. How many times have I heard in any NDP meetings, we need to not only extract our resources, but we need to add value. We need to transform our resources here. We need to be in that. How many times I have heard, how come we don't have more refinery for our oil? How come we can't do like value added petroleum products? But all of that, but that's right now. That's the discussion we should be having right now. That's the discussion Carney is having with Danielle Smith. We should be having it too. What do we do? And that's something we can bridge with Nemshi, I think. But first, we need to, Mr. Lewis will have to decide. Does he want to be right and get to 20%? Or does he want to win and get to 40%? That's a dilemma. Obviously, the first step, you need to walk before you run. So let's get back to official status. Let's get back into the mid-teens, early, small 20s in the numbers to get back in there. But eventually, you have to think long-term. How am I going to build this party? And the provincial wings, not to come back to but are super important. In 2015, I was there in the Leader of Opposition office when Rachel Notley won. Was it May of 2015? It rocket fueled the support of the Federal NDP. Absolutely. And so those wins in provincial areas will help Mr. Lewis. He needs to understand that, and so that's why he needs to gap that bridge.
Yeah, Farouk, I just want to second that feeling that in May when Rachel Notley won, it just inspired an idea of hope that, you know what, we can do this stuff, right? We can win anywhere if we can win in Alberta. And that really helped the federal party. So yeah, getting in the way, you got to find a way to support them. But I wanted to just add in a thought, because I also worked in the labor movement most of my career, and now I don't. I'm retired, but the labor movement needs somebody that they can put in front and go to the union hall to the general meeting and meet people who are the rank and file members, who is culturally not just in terms of what the value offer is as a policy offer, but culturally connected and talks the same language, feels the same emotions. And I think Rob really could be and still could be um, a great representative to do that kind of B tour for Avi, to keep rounding up the support for Avi if he's willing to do that. But I think, that would be wonderful. But I also worry a little bit that what has happened here is that, and maybe I'm wrong, but that unions didn't make much headway in selling memberships for him because there was too much already stacked against the idea of doing much for the NDP. So there's a lot of groundwork that would have to be done before you could have a candidate who did the kind of move that Rob was offering to make.
I also think like we have the issue in Ontario. We're still running, 3 parties in Ontario, and we keep having a hard time to kill the Liberals every election, right? And until we do that, we're not going to be, the way that we've been able to do successfully out West. It almost felt the same way a little bit in this leadership. Nobody knew, was Heather the person to beat Avi? Was Rob the person to beat Avi? And that also the who's going to be representing workers in opposition to somebody saying we're as it relates to resource extraction. So because there was no clear choice, it kind of also didn't seem to go anywhere. Right. It didn't really seem like people were mobilizing in the same way. I think Avi was able to excite people and to mobilize people. His base was like the folks who voted for him were motivated, whereas everybody who kind of voted for Rob or Heather was almost like, I'm not sure that I'm motivated in the same way. And I also don't know who to put my vote behind other than for this issue or that issue. So I also think that there's maybe some of that too, that in your point, Tom, of the, it felt like there was no point almost, or it was too far ahead. I think there was some of that playing into that.
If I can just add something, and to your question, Nikki, about sort of when you win, what do you lose? And when you lose, what do you win? This is really pressing on my mind right now in terms of the relationship with Labour. And I think if Avi is smart and thoughtful, he will put someone like Rob,
Totally.
in a position of like liaison or organizer or some way to build that up. I think that's always a good sign of leadership when you sort of do an assessment on day one of where your gaps and weaknesses are, and then fill them with people around you. What I'm noticing too in terms of what we might have given up is experience, both speaking directly to workers that Rob offers, and beating conservatives that Heather offers, right? So those two things are pretty key. Rob told me repeatedly throughout the campaign that he would go to events and people would approach him and say, I voted for Pierre Poilievre in the last election and I'm here. We need him. We need that ability to get those voters back. So
absolutely.
Let's just switch gears a little bit.
If I can add.
Yeah.
Okay, so we said he's going to have to work with provincial leaders, man fences. He's going to have to work with labor. There's a third part of it that's dear to my heart, Quebec. Now, I was happy that in his speech, now Mr. Lewis is the one that speaks the most French out of all the candidates, so that's going to be helpful. But what I would suggest, that first of all, in the next weeks, month or so, we're going to have bad news in Quebec from the NDP. Like, everything's, all the signs indicate that the NDP is going to lose his deputy NDP leader and the only MP in Quebec, Mr. Boulris. So that's going to be another obstacle, another challenge that he's going to have to face. And I would suggest maybe in the first part of, I don't know what his plan is, but if I'm putting myself in the operational mode, the first plan of business is to get to 20%, get to official status. Maybe Quebec is not part of that in that first part, right? I would not put too much energy in that to get there. But thinking long term, you need to start putting back roots in Quebec. Mr. Layton took from 2004 till the Orange Wave. It took all that work in Quebec to get there, right? So he's going to have to continue working on his French. And I would suggest at least once a month, spend a couple days in Quebec. reconnect with old MPs, reconnect with old activists or new activists that he brought along, a new generation. I don't know, but spend some time, even though it's not going to be paying off in the short term. In the long term, once you're ready to get to the second level, to power, it'd be important that work has been done ahead of time.
Okay, so let's just think about. So we're now switching from a place where Avi, he took the slate, he won, impressively. He's got to shift from being a leader of a campaign, a candidate in a campaign, to a leader for all New Democrats, or all federal New Democrats anyway. He's got probably some things in mind that he wants to achieve, and I bet you all, the folks around this table here, have some thoughts about some things that he wants to be able to signal, some deliverables, if you will, for the media environment to say, I have my plan of rebuilding, and I did this, and I did this, and I did this. One of them is not far down the road, is the CLC convention. So what do you think are the kind of things that, say, as we approach from here to summer, that might be the good news indicators that Avi is on the path to healing any wounds, to bringing the team together, the unity message that he talked about? So let's start with Mel.
Yeah, make those meetings with provincial counterparts happen. If leadership in those provinces is saying no, well, how can your team start building those relationships? I remember, there was a point where I can't remember who the leader in Saskatchewan was at the time, but him and Jagmeet, or they weren't talking to Jagmeet, but I was still talking to the director of communications, and it wasn't necessarily a, hey, let's have a chat, let's be friends. It's a, hey, just so you know, we're going to talk about this thing, and we're going to do everything we can not to step on your ground, but just wanted to make sure you knew so that you could prepare for it in case anything kind of went sideways, right? So start at that level if you're not able to do leader to leader, and do the same thing with labor. Figure out who you should be talking to, start building those relationships, start figuring out what our collaboration looks like. And I would say start putting together a plan. We don't think that there's an election coming anytime soon, but it will come. So figure out, how are you making the choices different between you and the Prime Minister and you and Pierre Poilievre, and figure out what are those next ridings that we need to go get. Which ridings did we, lose by a close margin, where we've got MPs that lost and they're willing to run again? Figure those out, have those conversations, and start plotting that, because it will come sooner rather than later. And I would say this may not be popular, but how are you getting to Ottawa? How are you getting your seat? How are you taking the opportunity of, when media, cares about us, you need to be there and you need to be able to respond. And I would say it's not enough to have one of our MPs respond. We know we live in a world where it's leader-centric, so you have to have your leader in the middle of that. So how is he going to be in Ottawa to take those opportunities? I think that's what I would have figured out. If not on paper, what am I trying to say? If not in practice as a concept, like down on paper, here's the plan, here's how we're working towards it, and use your champions. There's a lot of people like us who do this stuff. Talk to those folks, pass your message to those folks, show the potential with us so that we can tell the good news, and empower, the people who are within the party to tell the good stuff that you're working on is what I would say needs to start happening.
Mel, before I bounce over Farouk, because I want to talk about the labor component, can I just ask you a very specific? We've got some signals for sure that Bob Canoe is like, I want to help this guy, right? And maybe I want to appear with him, and I want to be a booster. I want this, and he's not conflicted by the resource issue.
Yep.
What do you like? How can that relationship? How can he signal? This is the most popular premier in Canada. How can he use that to his advantage in the next little while? Specific, kind of if you were to think of an event or an idea for him.
Yeah, help me with your communication style, right? I think the cool thing about Wob is some may say he's pragmatic, but I don't think anybody's saying he's not progressive. Wob still has, he still lives our values. He still fights for our values. He's not afraid to say the things that are maybe considered woke by others while still being pragmatic. He has an ability to be committed to the things, the values that make us New Democrats, while also communicating to regular folks why that's not a progressive thing. That's just being a good neighbor. You know what I mean? Like he has an ability to bring people in who may not agree with the 10-point plan. And that's what I would say. The benefit of WAB, obviously, to a lot of folks, the credibility that WAB brings will be important to folks in the Ottawa bubble. But outside of that, it's like, how can I take these bold ideas, or the way that Avi likes to talk, which is maybe really great for a segment of our membership, but if my mom and dad are watching TV at home, have no sweet clue what you're talking about, how do we take the feeling of those ideas and communicate them in a way where my parents would lean in and say, oh, that's a really good idea? I think WAB does that. So I think that's an opportunity for Avi and his team to maybe be inspired by some of that.
And we saw WAB out already today having some fun around Avi's leadership. So, maybe giving him some lessons there as well on how to talk to the public.
Farouk, what do you think? You'll get the CLC convention May the 12th or 15th. So it's not very long, a few weeks, several weeks.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of things do you think when he arrives there might you want to be able to say that he's done, and so that hopefully he'll be invited, greeted, embraced, and speak. But of course, reception, there could be things to say, and there could be less things to say and more things to say, right?
Yeah, but first of all, protect WAB at all costs. Let's not make a Bobbery out of him. Keep him in the fold. We want to keep him close because I have big ambition for Mr. Watkins.
As does everybody else on this call, I think. Yeah.
For Mr. For the CLC, I think it's a great opportunity to start mending the fences and bringing unity, actions, bringing the action to the words. What if at the CLC, he announces his special advisor, labor advisor, Mr. Rob Ashton. He's going to be my go-to guy for labor. He's going to be the one going to talk to you guys, getting your information, your needs, what you guys want. And he's going to be my direct link to labor, something like that. We need something to shake up something to make sure that labor feels, okay, we have somebody that we can talk to. We have a direct line and somebody that talks, I think you were saying that previously, culturally, he understands us and we can talk to him. We don't need to put our, gloves around him. We can be who we are and he understands us. I think something like that would be beneficial to revamp something. He has to do stuff. I'm a communication guy too, Melanie. So he has to do some stuff communicationally in the next few weeks because the wind is facing him right now. First day becomes leader. Boom, Alberta. Boom, Saskatchewan. It comes. And maybe in a month it's in Quebec. Oh, what are you going to do in Quebec now that, So he has to answer all of these headwinds and try to judo that and bring some positivity to it. And maybe if you cannot mend fences, because these are big issues, I'm talking about resource extraction. If you cannot do it right away in the short term, pivot to something else that people can grab onto. I think that his whole plan on public participation, it's basically an old idea that's coming back to the forefront, but because it hasn't been talked about in a while, we need more details. We need to know how we talk about it. How does it work? I remember in 2015, I think it made the cut, the platform cut, but I'm not sure. We were suggesting to put a no-frill option for a cellular option, like a $15 cellular option to compete against the telecom and have a public option. It was a Alamo public option. Obama did his public option. I didn't do his public option, but tried to do it. So we tried to do a public option. But maybe it's something like that. But you have to be because it's such big items. Oh, we're going to be. We're going to be participating in a pipeline now, in a mine, in a telecom. What's going in a grocery store? How is it going to work? So maybe put some meat around that bone, and so that people can start debating that. And so, maybe that could be cool because we're in the context right now where we can debate those big ideas. Not only the international context, but the whole world is changing. But also the level of support of the NDP right now allows them to play with those ideas, and maybe one catches on and it becomes, nobody likes telecoms, nobody likes the big banks. So if you start with that, I think it's a good start.
It's hard to go wrong in certain things, right? But what about in Western Canada? Is there a way to, as Farouk says, to judo it? I didn't know that was a verb, but that's cool. Is there a way to judo it with Carla and with Naheed? In the next 2 months, say?
In the next 2 months, that feels pretty tough, right? Like, I think what he needs to do, maybe I'll start where Mel started. It's a little bit easier, which is like he should start to think through a map to soften his positions on some things, or a way to find a place that everyone can kind of agree to disagree. And right now it's too far away. So I would work on that pretty quick if I were him. I think what might help both the West and Labor is a bit of that, and also find something big and exciting that you can champion on behalf of Labor that takes the attention away from the areas we disagree and breathe some energy into something that we can all get behind. I think that's probably a good first move for him, given that the other is going to be a bit trickier to untangle.
I mean, I sort of think about having worked with Leighton in 04 when I was director in BC, and just what we had to do was so hands-on every day, thinking about his schedule when he got into BC, and it was maximizing his time. But a lot of that was also so strategic about getting into some of these ridings, helping them fundraise, but at the same time identifying potential candidates, volunteer mobilization, like just being hands-on. And, you know, Jack, when he didn't have a seat, had more time to do that. Also very limited resources, because I had to drive him around in my beat up Civic. He didn't have staff, right? We weren't fancy on buses, but it was so concerted to just do the work, get to editorial boards, have the conversation, but so much was riding focused on what they needed to get ready, because you need those candidates in place. We need a better result, of course, than last time, but they need money. And I think this campaign also promised more freedom for riding associations to go in. They're going to have to start to enact that, because we don't really have a big runway till a federal election for some of that work.
Yeah. I like that. I feel like that's a little bit in the same vein, in that the principle there is to offer first, ask second. And I think that can strengthen the relationship with Labor, also with the UDPs, also with the provinces, also with the members, right? What can you offer? How can you show up as service? And then you build loyalty and movement power from there.
Let me throw one last.
No, I got a plane to catch.
You got a plane to catch. All right. Well, the planes.
Well, this was fun.
9 for Nikki. Do they hold the planes? So we're going to have to wrap it. It's been great to have everybody here. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, we appreciate you all. You're working hard all weekend.
This is fun.
Our first ever panel. So that was a fun thing to do.
Thank you, everybody.
Maybe we should do something for the CLC. We'll see.
Yeah. Okay, talk soon. Thanks so much.
Take care.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks for joining Left East to West with hosts Nikki Hill and Tom Harkin. We'd love to hear your comments, ratings, follows, and shares. It helps people find us. To become a Left East to West community member and to help us reach even more Canadians, subscribe using the link in the show notes. You can watch us on YouTube or listen wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Just search for Left East to West and subscribe. I'm Doug Hamilton signing off for Left East to West. We'll see you next week.